Hello everyone, nice to see you again. It's Judy from Coffee, Cookies, and Books, and what I'm going to do today is what I promised I would do. I'm going to do my mid-March reading wrap-up, try to split up what I read into two different videos for you, because Lord knows I like to talk too much and they end up way too long. So with all that in mind, I hope you stick around and I'll see you on the other side. Well, okay, let's get with this. I don't want to take any longer than I have to. Lord knows my videos take long enough. So today we're doing my reading wrap up through to the middle of March. I'm recording this on the 14th of March. Everything that I've read up to this point, which is I've read 7 books and DNF'd 1. So I've got 8 books to cover with you. We're going to go through them fairly quickly. Fingers crossed. I know that when I do a full month together, it tends to get a bit too cumbersome and the videos just end up being way too long. So this is my first attempt in splitting them into 2 sections through the month, because that's about all that I can manage with my regular full-time job. First thing that I want to do is just quickly mention that I am in the middle of REALMATHON 4.0. So I'm actually doing this review just before we go into our full readathon weekend. It's basically from 7 o'clock tonight right through until the end of day Sunday, and just hammering in as many books as we can get to get extra points for our team. I'm on Team Monarch, so I will be definitely participating in that. And 2 of the books that I'm going to mention that I'm continuing forward with from one of my other challenges will be the first 2 that I'm going to read this weekend. Let's just, we will quickly just go over other 2 reading challenges. So the first one is the buzzword reading challenge. So I'll put that up here. And what I've read so far. So I picked 2 books out of this one from March, which is for this month, and the one for May, which I will be reading this weekend. So I've read A Sea of Unspoken Things. We are going to review that, which is my March read. And then I'm going to be reading coming up for the second half of the month, the other one that I chose, which was May, which is How to Survive Your Murder. So that one I'm going to read over this weekend because it's a really short book. Then the other challenge is also a buzzword challenge, the buzzword cover challenge. So out of the cover challenge, I had picked 3 books for this for REALMATHON. And the first one, of course, was March, which was Bookshops and Bonedust. Read that. We're going to review it. Other one is July's, which is Caliban's War. I read that. We're going to review that. And then the last one is June's, which is Death by Fire. That one is going to get read this weekend, so it'll be in my wrap-up at the end of the year, along with How to Survive Your Murder. So those were the 2 on the challenges that I did not read yet, but they are both up for this weekend. They're both short books. I think one is 330 and the other one is maybe 400 pages. So they're not really long. So we've got those. Now the other reading challenge that I participate in is the bingo reading challenge, but we're going to go over what I've chosen for the bingo reading challenge at the end of this video, because once you've seen everything that I've read and I explain to you the prompts that I've picked for it to fit into that challenge, you'll understand why after we do all of these reviews. So I think that's it. We will get into the reviews. The first one we're just going to start real quick with is The Ever King by L.J. Andrews. I DNF'd this one at 50 pages. Didn't care for the writing. Wasn't feeling characters, the environment, the story. Just, at 50 pages, I pretty much knew it wasn't for me, and I DNF'd it. So that was the first one. So just like we did in my last wrap-up video, we're going to start with the ones that I liked the least. Obviously, I've done the DNF first, and go through to the books that I enjoyed the most. There is a mix of print and ebook. I think I've got 3 ebooks in here. And then out of the 8 that I read, and Ever King was actually one of the ebooks. The other thing is I'm not going to give you any full stats. I will give you the full stats for the full month of March at the end of the month when I do the full reading wrap up. I will also just kind of give a quick overview of these ones. Obviously no review of them, but I will mention them quickly at the beginning of that video so that you know it's a refresher. Obviously I'll link to this one, and then we'll do the stats for the month, and we will go from there. So I think that should be a fairly easy flow to follow. You know, obviously I can refine it a little bit when we get to the next month, but for the most part, I think that should work nicely. Just a quick re-mention, I don't give star ratings. I'm going to give you my impressions of the book. My star ratings are in my Goodreads, and I am actually going to put the star ratings below in the description. So if you do want to see exactly what I rated them, it'll be there. And it's going to be in the order that we go through it in the video. And I do want to mention that I do have a bad habit of giving away some spoilers. I will do my best not to, but it's hard not to give away when I'm trying to give a full impression about what I thought about reading the book. Now, typically if I mention something at all, which may happen a little bit here and there on some of these books, it's going to be something that's minor and hopefully not something that would ruin the story for you. So I will do my best, you know, especially with some of these books that are series and or even the horrors and thrillers. You don't want the good stuff to be given away, so I'll do my best not to. Can't make any promises though. Let's get on with the first book. So the first book that I'm going to review with you is The Hitchcock Hotel by Stephanie Wroebel. I'm very middle of the road with this one. I don't even know if I would recommend it. This is a thriller, I guess. It is about 6 college students. One is Alfred, who owns the Hitchcock Hotel, and the other 5 were the 5 friends. Now, I say friends loosely because they weren't really friends. In my opinion, they are an awful group of people, including Alfred. None of them have any redeeming qualities. They're very self-absorbed, selfish, or whiny, or guilt-ridden, but it's just like the whole thing is very convoluted. And in the beginning, and what you're getting is you're getting all of their points of view, and then there's one extra person in there who is Danny, who is the housekeeper. So she's the other main character that's in the book. And she is important to the story, but, you know, she kind of flows in and out. Throughout the book, you're getting each of their points of view, and the points of view are going into the past, coming into the present, going into the past, coming into the present. It was so chaotic, and it was very, I found difficult to follow. It fragmented the story so much. And I mean, and I've read books like this, like Lucy Foley's Midnight Feast had a very similar tactic where it had the different points of view and it would be past and present, but it was just so much clearer on where we were going based on, I think her like her chapter descriptions and everything. This was just like willy-nilly. So I hated that. I also did not like any of the characters. I didn't like any of them. I thought they were all shallow and unlikable. Now, again, tiny little bit of, not really a spoiler, but a bit of a spoiler. At the very end, she attempts to inject warmth, and it's the best description I can come up with, between the people that are left, but it isn't really warmth. I mean, it's just so awkward, I guess, is a good way to put it. And that actually does reflect their relationship throughout the whole entire book. Now, the thing is, I think the book would have been better if the dead body, and I'm not going to say who ended up dead, but if the dead body had shown up in the first 100 pages. Well, we didn't get a dead body until 200 pages, and there are only 338 pages in this book. So everything leading up to that was all BS. It was just all of this back and forth, oh, I feel bad, or I don't feel bad, or I don't like him, or, oh, he's awful, or this, or she's awful, or, I mean, it was just constant. This was constant. So I'm even surprised that I even gave this what I gave it, because, and I read the whole thing and I didn't DNF it. Because when I have the print book, I typically won't DNF it. But I can say, now, I do tag it, but what I tag it for is for reference for me to go back to write my review. So I don't write anything in the tags, so the tags can come out, go in the garbage, and there's nothing wrong with the book. The book is fine. And I would say the likelihood is that I will unhaul this because I didn't like it enough. Either I'll unhaul it or I'll put it in a little free library. There's nothing in it that is suspect. There's nothing gory in it. There's nothing to grab your attention in it. So, as I said, didn't really care for it and wouldn't necessarily recommend it. So that's that one. Okay, so the next book is The Hero by Susan Stoker. I'm going to put it up here. It was ebook on Kindle Unlimited, and it's the third book in a series. Game of Chance, I think, is the name of the series. I only got one more book to read in the series, so I've basically taken this one out, put the fourth one in, and then the series will be done, and that's in my Kindle Unlimited. It'll get read eventually. So this one, very middle of the road. All of the books in this series have been middle of the road for me. I will say that this is my favorite out of the three so far. But as with the other two, it again is insta-love. And it just felt a bit too contrived for me. But having said that, I liked the male main character. I liked the female main character. He was kind of like a protective alpha teddy bear, you know, and their whole situation was that she was in a prison in Thailand, falsely accused of crime, and he went in to rescue her. So it's the beginning of the story is him getting her out of that situation, but included in that is the fact that through this process, they're forced together in close situations, and they're forced to get married. I'm not going to expand on that too much, but they're forced to get married. What happens that kind of bothered me a little bit about the whole forced to get married thing is that they're forced to get married, and then shortly after that, we're talking days, they're in love. And I'm like, yeah. And sure, attracted? Absolutely. Forced proximity, that's the whole idea of that kind of trope, is that it almost forces an attraction on the two of them because they have to be so close together. And then if they have to get married, yeah. But love, it kind of was a bit of a stretch for me. But I understood how come the two of them were kind of felt that way. As it played out, that of course, you know, they do get out of their situation, but then she ends up in another situation because the person who basically double-crossed her and put her in the jail in Thailand comes after her. So that kind of extends into the story afterwards. I mean, I think you sort of expect that to happen just from things that are said through the beginning of the book and as it leads into it. So that might be a tiny bit spoilery, but it's not really because I expected that to happen. So, you know, overall, I did really like the two characters, as I said, and of course, all of the other characters that were from the previous books all come into play later on in the book. So, you know, it's really like that. A very similar kind of idea, because this one was, the first two, not overly suspenseful. This one had a bit more suspense to it, especially right in the beginning, quite a lot. And so she kind of lists them under action adventure, and I would say they definitely fall under that category. I wouldn't say they're as suspenseful as Brittney Sahin book is, because Brittney's books are super suspenseful, like super suspenseful. This, I say, is very much just action and adventure. So there's a little bit of that built into it, but it's definitely more of a love story. So, so overall, you know, I liked it. Very mid for me again, but it did not turn me off enough to not want to read the fourth one, because now, of course, I'm invested in all these characters, and I do want to read the fourth one in the group, so I will read the fourth one in the group. So that'll be coming up at some point this year. I would imagine I will get to that, because it's in my, if it's in my Kindle Unlimited, it'll definitely get read. All right, so next is Cruel Prince by Holly Black. And I quite enjoyed this book. You know, not what I would consider to be super top tier, but pretty close to it. So this is the story of Jude, and who's her sister? Her sister is Taryn, so that's her twin sister. And then her other sister is Vivian, I think, or Vivi is her, I think that's a short form for Vivian. That's her oldest sister. Now, the story begins right at the start with, they're at home with their parents, and some man shows up, and he kills both of the parents, and he takes the 3 kids, and he takes them to live with the Fae. And he's Fae. And he is like a general warrior. I wouldn't say that he is, I mean, he's mean and he wants power, but he does have an affection for the girls. Even though, so Vivian is his daughter from the woman who was the mother, and Jude and Taryn are not his. They are the father who was killed. So that's their father. But they are so young when this happens. I think they're 7 when it happens, that they come to look at Madoc as their father, even though he can be cruel at times. So it's a very unusual dynamic. Now, Taryn is very quiet, and she doesn't really react to a lot. Like, she's like very status quo. Whereas Jude is the warrior of the two. So even though she's human, she wants to be as powerful as her father, which is Madoc. And that's always uppermost in her mind. It's a lot of the ideas of who she thinks she can be. Like, I think that she has quite a lot of, he inspires her quite a bit. And I don't think that, like, even in her dealings with the teenage Fae at school, she pushes the limits. It's like she's constantly pushing the limits. So it's no surprise, I think, that as we go through the book, Jude becomes a morally questionable person. It's like it's twisting her. And you can see it and feel it. And a lot of it is not just herself, but in how she's dealing with the Fae court. And then the, like, there's a coronation, which is very near the beginning of the book. And it's just like a slaughter at this coronation. And I'm like, whoa, whoa. And the thing is that, and she actually visually saw the entire thing. I'm kind of not surprised that she developed to the point that she's at. I'm also not, now I don't want to say too much because this is a 3-book series, and I am hoping to at least get to the next book in the series before the end of the month. So as part of my REALMATHON reads, I do want to read the next book. But of course she makes a deal with the prince who she hates and who she thinks hates her, but they make a deal right at the end of the book, which I don't think is really much of a giveaway because I think that's kind of part of the whole thing that everybody knows about it. But it's how it comes to be and how it comes to pass and the things that she does in this book that really make you question her morals and her moral compass a little bit. I mean, you know she's got it and still got a little bit of that, but even her relationship with her sisters is there. There's also something else that happens in the book. Now, the one thing about Jude, she's an observer, okay? So she watches a lot of what's going on around her, and she's able to figure out specific secrets that have been kept hidden for quite some time. And she's just super smart about this stuff, okay? So she uses those things a little bit, but I think in the long run, it's because she thinks she's doing something good. Remains to be seen, you know? As soon as we get into the next 2 books, it'll be, well, has all the things that she's done in this book actually done any good, right? So, yeah, I mean, I didn't hate it by any means. I did enjoy it, and, you know, it was a fairly quick read. It was only 370 pages, and I think this might be the longest of the 3 books. I'm not really entirely sure, but I'm hoping to get at least one of the other 3 in before the end of the month, but we'll see how that goes. Just fingers crossed on that one. So that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So the next one is one from Book of the Month. It's one of this book I think came out in January, batch of books, and it is A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne Young. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Now, it is emotional read. Now, it starts out right at the beginning with James, who is a girl, and Johnny, who is her twin brother, and Johnny dies. And she knows he died because they have a very unusual connection between them. Because of that, she has to go home to the small town where they grew up. Now, she currently, in the beginning of the book, she lives in San Francisco. She's an artist, and she's a successful artist. And she lives in San Fran, and she has to go to the hometown that she hates to, of course, take care of Johnny's things. Now, they own a cabin in this small town. You know, he has his dog. There are people she does not particularly want to see, but of course, they have to deal with it. How he dies is he dies in a what they consider to be an accident. He's out in an area, the gorge they call it, and he is shot. So they think that he was shot by a hunter because he didn't have a vest on. Now, she, from the beginning, does not believe that his death was an accident. She just doesn't feel that any of the reason that he was out there is normal. Now, Johnny was a successful photographer. He was he shot nature, and he actually was working for a foundation shooting owls. That was something he loved, and he would go out to the gorge, but he always wore a safety vest. The other thing that she found odd was he did not have his cameras with him. All the cameras were back at the house. So the more and more she looked into it, the more and more she felt that he did not die by accident. And as things unravel, and believe me, it just completely unravels on her. The entire book is in her point of view, and it is a very emotional point of view. And there is some delving into the past, because the past shapes some of what happens in the future a bit. And I don't know if it necessarily has a direct impact on that, but it certainly feels like it does, right? So when you're going through it, you learn about, first of all, how close the two of them were, and that the connection between them was very real on both sides. There's also a past love interest. Well, yeah, I mean, love interest. I mean, they were 18, I guess. But Micah, who is still there and who is still Johnny's best friend. So she has to deal with that. And there is, whether or not there's still attraction there or not. Of course, that's not the main part of the story, but it adds so much more depth to her and to the things that the two of them experience, because he also has experienced things because of that, and the fact that they are hiding something about the death of a student. So that's like right at the beginning, that's what's going on. It doesn't really come to light until pretty close to the end, but you kind of get an inkling as you're going through the book and reading through it on where that might be headed. A little bit of that. There's little hints to it. So yeah, and the thing is, there were a couple of twists and turns in there that I was like, just completely caught me off guard. So to me, that was a huge success, because while I might have guessed a few things, the actual finale, I did not guess at all. Maybe a teensy-weensy tiny inkling, but in the right direction, but with the wrong person, basically. So anyways, yeah, like hugely, thoroughly enjoyed it. I do have another one of hers, because when I bought this one, I also bought The Making of June Farrow. So I do have that one. It's on my shelves. It'll get picked and read at some point, but I actually, after having read this one, really would like to read that. I would say that this is a bit of, like I said, I think I said it at the beginning, a bit of an emotional tug. I would not suggest that you read this if you don't want to be a little bit depressed, because it is a bit depressing and very sad. And the things about her brother and the things that she questions about her brother as she goes through. Yeah, it's really sad and kind of a little bit hard to work your way through it a bit, but I would totally recommend it. Okay, so next one we're going to do is the last ebook that I read, which is My Every Breath by Brittney Sahin. So this is the second book in the Becoming Us series. The first one I read, can't remember the title off the top of my head, but it was in my February wrap-up, and that was Grace King's story. This is her brother Cade King's story, and it is also the second last book I have of Brittney Sahin's that's on her backlist to read. So I really wanted to get this one done, because I have one more of hers to read, which I'm hoping to read by the end of this month, and then all of her backlist is done. I'm a little sad. I think I say that every time, but yeah, a little bit. But anyways, so I have that one. So this is about Cade King, and he's a billionaire grumpy sunshine. No, he's just billionaire grumpy. Like from the first book, he was major a-hole in the first book. Moving into the second book, he's just grumpy. So he's kind of improved on a scale. He's gone up a little bit, but he's still really grumpy. And then, and he goes, so it starts off and he goes to a strip bar with his brother and his brother's friend Jerry, who is, I think he's FBI, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And it is an Irish mafia bar. So, I mean, of all places to take them, but that's where he takes them. And he runs into Gia Callahan, who is a mob hitman's daughter. So this is where it all kind of starts off. Cade likes, like he's attracted to her right away. She's attracted to him right away. But as with most of Brittney's stories, they don't start off really easy. There's quite a lot that rolls into them, and quite a lot that rolls in before they get to the point where they give into their sexual tension, so to speak. So, and that is exactly what happens with this. Now, the situation with her is that she's actually, her mother was Brazilian, I think it was Brazilian, and her mom was killed, and she hid. Her mom was killed no, I'm sorry. Her mother was hurt. They came into the house. She was hiding. They took her mother away, and she believed that her mother was taken by human traffickers, because that is not uncommon in Brazil, where they lived. So that's what she thinks happened. And her father came and took her back to New York with him, in a sense, to protect her. So, and you kind of get that feeling that he did that for that, but she doesn't see it that way. She thinks that he like put her in like a prison. So it's like being in prison. And the Irish Mafia, there was the guy who was the head of the Irish Mafia, he, who also protected her, who her father worked for, he ended up in jail. And when he ended up in jail, then who ends up in charge is his son, and his son is a dirtbag, basically. So the whole story kind of revolves around Cade trying to get her out of the situation, but she's also trying to get herself out of the situation. And because there's the communication's not great between the two of them, and that's because the situation really, like in this particular case, I understand why there's a little bit of miscommunication between them, because it does make sense that she wouldn't tell him everything because she doesn't know him all that well. And he naturally hides things because he's the oldest in the family, and that's just always been the case. Cade has always hidden things from his siblings to protect them. I mean, that's just kind of the way it's always been with them. Now, there are some characters, as with all of Brittney's books, there are some characters that appear in this book that are from other books. Now, I had no idea that Mia, who is from the Falcon Falls series, was going to show up in this book. I had no idea. And she's a journalist, and so you can imagine why she would be in this book. She's like an investigative journalist, and a really good one. And so she shows up in the book. But then also Connor, who is from the Hidden Truth series, which I reviewed his book again last month in February. Connor, with his brother Mason and the security company that they've created, they show up in this book as well. So there's all of that. They get involved in the whole situation. Now, I don't want to give too much away, because how it ended was not at all something I saw coming. There was part of it, a little bit, I kind of saw coming, where her father's involvement was. A little bit of that you could kind of predict a bit on what was going to go down there. Not the very ending of it. So, and I did knock it down a little bit because I felt the ending was a little abrupt. So there was like a section in there that just kind of happened a bit too fast. Like in most of her books, she draws things out enough that you don't miss bits and pieces. But in this particular case, this book was only 292 pages. And I find most of her books sit around 400 to 500 because they're suspense, right? Yes, they're romance, but they're romantic suspense. They have very intricate storylines. And so she doesn't miss a beat on any of the details that are in there, because you need that information. And so there was some of what happened towards the end that I felt kind of just happened too fast, okay? So that was kind of where it brought it down just a tiny bit for me, but I would say I enjoyed the story. I liked the both the male lead and the female lead characters. I thought they were fantastic. As always enjoyed seeing the characters from her other books in there. a hell of a lot. Loved that. So overall, you know, it was a good read for me. Would I say it was one of the best? No, but you know, out of the 8 books I read, it was solid. So definitely above the mid for me, and I would highly recommend this one. I will say I liked this one much better than the first book in the 2. The first book had no suspense. So the first book was more of what you would consider to be a contemporary romance book, not an action suspense romance book. This one kept more in line with her typical writing. So that was why I enjoyed it all that much more. Okay, so that's it for that one. Okay, so the next book is Bookshops and Bonedust. Now, I read Legend Lattes last year, and I gave the first book 3 stars. So, I mean, I'm telling you that because that was what I gave you in the mind. Now, this, so much better. I loved this book. It had, I guess, kind of filled in a lot of questions that you would have about Viv from Legend and Lattes. But it had just so many things. So I wrote a few things down. So one of the things about Viv, of course, is, so she's young in this. I think she's just at a point where kind of her career as a mercenary is kind of just getting started, and she gets injured. And because she gets injured badly. And so they basically have to take her and they drop her in this town. And they leave her there and they say they're going to come back to get her. She's pissed. But she is a typical young person, right? Like, she just thinks she's indestructible. And she's like annoyed that she has to sit in this town and whatever. So, you know, I mean, it makes it hard for her. Never mind the fact that her injury actually makes it hard for her even to get around. But, you know, she manages to kind of make her way around the town. And as Viv did in the first book, in this book, Viv has a tendency to basically attract, I say she's a collector. And she's a collector of kind of people who need her. And I think when it comes right down to it, she needs them too. And I think this is probably part of the reason why she does what she does as a mercenary, is in her mind she's helping people. And I think that's what drives her quite a bit. And you actually get quite a lot more from this book about that. And in the course of her exploring the town, she meets a lot of oddballs, right? But really sweet people. So there's the person who owns the bookshop, who is actually, you know, on the cover, and that would be right there. And then this is the animal that is kind of like the sidekick to our bookshop owner. You know, they're funny and they're quirky and they have great personalities. And then there is Brand, who owns, I've read them all, Brand, who owns the Perch, which is the bar hotel where she's staying in this place. And then there is, so Fern is the one who owns the Thistlebur, I can't say Thistlebur bookshop. So that's her. And Pitts is a bald orc who lives in the village, who Viv cajoles him into helping her at certain points. And then Galena is a gnome who actually she is then mentioned as one of her teammates in the first book. So it's like you're getting kind of an insight into her as well, which I thought was really great. And she shows up and she's a bit of a pain in the butt, but she sticks around. And then there's Maley, who owns the bakery, and Maley is kind of, I guess, what you would consider to be a love interest for Viv. You get all of that. So you get all of these characters, but what you also get, which I think is what made this so much better, is there's an actual suspenseful story, fantasy story, in behind all these characters, okay? So while Viv is trying to help all of them, they're also trying to figure out some pretty dark stuff that's going on in this village, right? So it's like there is not really a dead part to the book, okay? Even, and what I also really liked, so the whole part about the bookshop is just how he has been able to kind of thread into this the idea of a bookshop and how she would sell new books, and oh, they have a local author that lives close by who, they approach to do a signing. I mean, just how the whole thing comes together is adorable, okay? But, kind of like current, but really not current because it's all written in a fantasy environment in a small town. Who knows when, right? Very historical. So I really loved that part of it. Now, it had me laughing at so many points. Like, I parked off a ton of stuff in here because it actually has some pretty snappy one-liners. And as with the next person, there are some books where humor works and some books where they don't. It worked really well in this book. And it worked really well because of the characters in the book. Now, there's one character in the book that I'm not going to say. I don't want to say too much, but he is highly unusual, and part of what really leads them to want to free him and help him. But he also helps them. So it's kind of like a very, it's hard to describe without giving away too much, because I don't want to give away too much. But oh my gosh, so great. And I loved the last chapter because the last chapter ties it all back to Legend and Lattes, but also opens it up to another possible book. And honestly, if he wrote another book, I would 100% read it for sure. I enjoyed this so much. So can't say enough good things about it. It's like you could read this before Legend and Lattes. 100% you could read this before. I read Legend and Lattes first because it came out first and that was the one I read. But you could read this one. You could read this first or after. You would not be lost either way, I do think that reading the Legend and Lattes first means that when you get to the last chapter in this book, you understand where you're at when you get to the last chapter and why the last chapter happens. So that's why it's like you might want to read Legend and Lattes first. But anyways, yeah, it is a great book. I mean, everybody says wholesome and cozy and whatever, and it may very well be, but it had a great fantasy element behind it too. So quite good. Highly recommend. Okay, that takes us to the last book that I read, and that was Caliban's War, which is the book 2 in the Expanse series. First book's the Leviathan Wake, and that was my best book in December. Best book of 2024. Absolutely love that book. I did not think that it was possible this book could be better, and it was. The one thing about Leviathan Wakes that I did find, now Leviathan Wakes basically more or less follows 2 points of view. So you have Holden and Miller. Miller was a detective on the Belt, which is a asteroid belt area where people live, and he was investigating the missing daughter of an Earther, which is somebody from Earth. Now Holden was on a ship that was destroyed in basically an act of war, and he and some of the crew were not on that ship when it happened because they were off investigating a ship a good distance away. So they saw it all happen. So that story converges from there, and it actually brings Miller and Holden together as they fight to stop a war between Mars and Earth and some hidden entity who wants to release this proto-molecule that would basically destroy everything. So it was a crazy story. But then it ends there, and so Holden has his crew on the Rocinante, which I think is how you pronounce the name of the ship that they have, and they're off running, doing jobs for the OPA, which is like an activist sort of organization, and, you know, they're looking for ship pirates and things like that. So that's what they're off doing, and that comes to this book. So the way this book starts off is it starts off in a very similar fashion. So the way the first book started, it started with the young missing daughter on the ship she was on, and it was overtaken by something. And you don't know what until you get further into the book. In this one is a 5-year-old girl, and she's kidnapped along with a bunch of children, and that sets off a bunch of things, and then there's an attack on Mars, which is where Ganymede base is, where this little girl was, and there was an attack, but there was an attack by a monster. So it kind of starts from there, and it goes from there. Now, the difference with this book is there are multiple points of view. So I think 5 or 6 different, so there's Holden, of course, and there is Bobby, she's a Martian Marine. There is Prax, who is the father of the little girl who went missing. And there is Avasarala, who is a, what did I put down that she is? She's a UN undersecretary on Earth. So she's an Earther. Is that it? I think that might be it. So there's 4 points of view. But what happens in this particular book is that all their points of view converge very quickly. And unlike the other story, which took some time to build, and I think it was because you were getting a lot more world building in the first book. In this second book, there is quite a bit of that is already established, right? Like, the establishment of Earth, and you know about Mars, and you know about the belt, and you understand all this. They don't have to re-explain that, and they don't re-explain it. They give you some pieces here and there because they are adding on to it, but they don't have to give you that overall world building. So this moved much faster, and everything that happened in it happened for a reason. I friggin' loved it, okay? There was not any point in it where I didn't think it made sense, and how eventually all of these characters ended up to be together in one place completely made sense to me. Even right down to the very end, and where it appears that they're going from there. And I say appears because I'm like, I don't think we've heard the last of all of these characters, okay? I think that there's a good possibility that these characters will end up potentially showing up again in the future. Maybe not all of them, but who knows? They may very well. The only one that I kind of question that might not show up is Bobby, the Martian Marine. But you never know. She may very well. And I'm excited to get into book 3. The difficulty with reviewing this is I can't say too much other than to say that the story continues into this. What I can say is there is a huge human element that is built into it in such a way, because you're getting You know, Prax is a father who's lost his daughter, trying to find her. Holden, he has his crew. He's trying to hold them together. Avasarala, she's a undersecretary. She's tough, but it's kind of like she has to be. But there are insights into her that you still like her so much. And I really liked her character quite a lot, okay? And then even Bobby, and Bobby's dealing with that fight that happened right at the very beginning because she was the only survivor of that. So, and this is something that happens right at the beginning of the book. So when you kind of go, like you look at all of that and you really feel they put an awful lot into really feeling the characters of all these people, which just is amazing to me because, you know, I mean, well, it's a 600-page book, but at the same time, 600 pages, science fiction, and for everything that happens in this book, and getting as much as I did out of it, I freaking loved it. I just can't say anymore. Abaddon's Gate is the third book in the series. I have actually bought all of them. And I have all, I can't remember how many are over there. I think there's like 7 books in series. I don't know, something like that. Anyways, I bought them all because I plan on reading the entire series 100%. Abaddon's Gate will get read this year for sure because I have it in my 25 books that I must read in 2025. I had this one and I had Abaddon's Gate, and so this one. And plus this one was on the cover challenge, I think it was, or reading challenge, I don't know. It was on one of those ones that I showed you at the beginning. It was on one of those. Okay, so that's it. So that was my favorite book of the month so far. Lastly, what I wanted to cover is the bingo challenge, which is the challenge where I try to fill all the bingo spots before the end of the year. So I'll put that up here, 25 and 2025. So currently I've got 5 spots filled, and you can see them up there. So what I've done is, out of these 7 books, because I do not count a DNF on this at all, only the books that I've read, but I do count ebooks and print books. So I have picked 2 of them. So the first one is Bookshops and Bonedust, and I put that under LGBTQ plus representation because Viv is gay. Viv is with a woman, so that is part of the storyline. That one goes in there. I think that's a perfect one for representation. And then the other one that I picked was TBR Vet, which is at the bottom. And I put in My Every Breath by Brittney Sahin because that's one that's been on my TBR to be read for quite some time. So I put that one down there because I think that's one of my oldest ones. I put that there. So there's just the 2. Now, I am hoping to get 2 more out of whatever I read for the rest of this month. And hopefully that will mean that, that covers quite a bit because there's 25 boxes we have to cover here. So hopefully you can get more covered. We'll see what else I get to read out of all of these books that I've picked. If you want to see what my TBR for March, my potential TBR for March is, I will link that below as well because I did have, basically, I've picked 25 books in total that I want to read for REALMATHON. I'm not going to read 25. Likelihood is I read about 15. So between now and the end of the month, because I've already read 7, 1 DNF, likelihood is that I could potentially read another 7. So that is between ebooks and print books. So we'll see how it goes, right? Okay, so I guess that's it for now. So that is my March reading wrap-up. Mid-March, sorry. I'm so used to doing the whole month all at once, but I think this is going to be a heck of a lot quicker. And I did try to make my review roundups just a bit faster. But if you have any questions about any of the books, I do have all of the books linked below, along with my star ratings, as I mentioned. So feel free to ask me anything. I'd be happy to point you in the right direction. All right, so I guess that's it, and I will see you in a week.